Zola was excited. It was her birthday, the first one since she got married to Temba. She wanted to keep it simple, just a small meal, a quiet evening, and maybe a slice of cake. She cooked, cleaned, and even wore the dress Temba liked. She hoped he would be kind today. Maybe he would smile. Maybe he would bring a gift. But as the sun went down in the small town of Mbeya, the celebration turned into a nightmare. Temba came home angry. He started shouting about small things, the food, the way she looked at him, the fact that she spoke too much. Zola stayed quiet, hoping it would calm him down, but it didn't. His anger grew. He called her disobedient and said she didn't respect him. Before she could even understand what was happening, he grabbed a bottle of cooking oil and poured it all over her. She screamed. He lit a match, and in 1 second, her world became fire. Zola's skin burned. Her dress melted. Her voice disappeared under the pain. Neighbors heard the screams and came running. Someone called for help. She was rushed to the hospital, barely alive. Her birthday had become the day she would never forget, not because of joy, but because of horror. The man who promised to protect her had tried to kill her, and all because she dared to speak, to breathe, to exist in a way he didn't like. In that one cruel moment, everything changed. Her body, her life, her future, all burned. But her story was just beginning. What Temba didn't know was that Zola's spirit was stronger than fire. The pain was like nothing Zola had ever felt before. It wasn't just the fire that had burned her skin. It was something deeper, something colder, something that lived in her bones now. When she opened her eyes in the hospital in Dar es Salaam, the lights above her felt too bright, and the air smelled like chemicals. Her body was wrapped tightly in thick white bandages. She couldn't move her arms, couldn't speak, couldn't cry, couldn't even turn her head properly. Her face was stiff and sore, and every breath felt like dragging a stone through her lungs. For a moment, she didn't remember what had happened. Then it all came back. Her birthday, the cooking oil, the match, the flames, the scream that never made it out of her mouth. Zola wanted to scream now, but the pain was too much. The nurses came in and out of her room, checking machines and changing drips. They didn't look at her much. She heard them whispering outside the door. One of them said, "She's lucky to be alive." Another replied, "She won't last. Not like this." They didn't think she could hear them, but she did. Every word cut deeper than her wounds. Days turned into nights. Nights turned into weeks. Zola lay still in the bed, her whole world reduced to the soft beep of machines and the slow drip of medicine. Time felt strange in the hospital. She didn't know what day it was, or if it was morning or evening. She slept a lot, but the sleep never rested her. It was more like disappearing for a while. In the beginning, she had hope. She thought someone would come. She waited for her friends. No one came. At first, she told herself it was because they were busy, or they didn't know she was in the hospital yet. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they were trying to reach her and couldn't. But as the days passed, that hope slowly broke apart. The calls never came. The flowers never arrived. Not even a card. Friends she had known for years, women she had helped, cried with, laughed with, disappeared like smoke. Her phone, which once buzzed with messages and birthday wishes, was silent. Forgotten in some drawer maybe, or tossed aside like her. Then one day, her sister-in-law showed up. Zola could barely see her through the burns and bandages, but she recognized the voice. Her heart lifted, just for a second. But the woman didn't hug her, didn't even come close. She stood by the door, arms folded, looking at Zola like she was some stranger in the street. After a long, quiet minute, she said, "You brought shame on our family." Zola blinked, confused. "You made our brother look like a monster," the sister-in-law said coldly. "But no woman gets burned like that for no reason." Then she turned and walked out. Zola stared at the door for hours after that, hoping she would come back. She didn't. A few days later, a doctor came in with two people in formal clothes, a man and a woman. Zola thought maybe it was about Temba. Maybe they were police. Maybe they were here to arrest him. Instead, they asked her to confirm her name. She nodded. They looked at each other and said, "His family says they don't know you." That was all. Just like that, her marriage was erased. Her identity as Temba's wife? Denied, as if she had never existed in their world. The people who had eaten at her wedding, danced with her, called her our daughter, now pretended she was nobody. Temba himself was nowhere to be found. After the fire, he had vanished. Some said he ran to South Africa. Others said he paid someone to hide him. No one really knew, and no one was really looking. The police took a report, but that was it. No visits, no questions, no arrests. Zola was alone, and she was starting to believe the whispers. She won't survive. Her body was changing. Her hands, once soft and full of life, were now curled and scarred. She couldn't move her fingers. Her face, she hadn't seen it in weeks, but she could feel it. The skin felt tight, uneven, rough. One day, a nurse brought her a small mirror without thinking. Zola looked at it for half a second before throwing it across the room. That face wasn't hers. It was someone else. Someone broken. Someone burnt. She felt invisible, not just from the pain, but from the silence. No one said her name. No one asked how she was feeling. People treated her like a body in a bed, not a person. She wanted to scream, but her voice was weak. Even when she tried to speak, it came out as a whisper. Sometimes nurses leaned in to hear her. Sometimes they didn't bother. She gave up trying. But every day something in her kept fighting. Even if it was small, even if it was silent, there were moments when she would lie in the bed and think, "This is it. I should give up. Just close my eyes and let go." But something deeper than pain, deeper than fear told her, "No, not yet." One day a young nurse came in. Her name was Amina. She didn't speak much either, but her hands were gentle. She cleaned Zola's wounds with care. She talked softly to her while changing the bandages, even if Zola couldn't respond. She didn't flinch when she looked at Zola's face. She didn't act like Zola was a monster. Amina gave Zola a small notebook and a pen, saying, "You can write, if you want, or draw, or anything." At first, Zola couldn't even hold the pen properly. Her right hand was too damaged, but she tried with her left. The lines were shaky, the letters crooked, but it felt like something, like control, like hope. She wrote her name, over and over again, Zola. She wrote what she couldn't say. She wrote letters to her younger self. She wrote poems to the sky. She wrote everything she felt, everything she feared, and sometimes she drew faces, eyes, flames, broken hearts, women screaming without sound, women standing tall in fire. It was through this quiet practice that she found pieces of herself again. Months passed. The bandages came off slowly. The wounds healed, but the scars stayed. Zola saw her reflection again. This time she didn't cry. She looked at herself carefully. She touched her new face with her bent fingers and whispered, "You're still here." The hospital prepared to move her from ICU to the rehab ward. She had survived longer than anyone expected. The nurses no longer whispered, "She won't make it." Now they said, "She's strong." Some even smiled when they passed her bed. But she wasn't just strong. She was changing, becoming. Alone in that room with no husband, no family, and no friends, Zola started building a new life, from scratch, from ashes. And though the world had turned away from her, she was just getting ready to face it again, on her terms, with her story, in her own voice. The room was cold and white. Machines beeped. The smell of medicine was strong. Zola lay still on the hospital bed, her body wrapped in heavy bandages. Her face was swollen and burned. Her hands were covered and stiff. She couldn't move much. She couldn't speak. She only blinked slowly, feeling pain in every part of her body. She was alive, but she didn't feel alive. After the fire, she was brought to Dar es Salaam. The doctors said she was lucky to survive, but Zola didn't feel lucky. Her skin was gone in many places. Her face was no longer hers. Her hands, she couldn't feel her fingers. Her right side was worse. It hurt just to breathe. She opened her eyes, but no one she knew was there. No family, no friends, just nurses, just doctors, strangers with gloves and masks. They came and went, giving her injections, changing her bandages. Some were kind, some were quiet, none stayed long. At first she hoped someone would come. Maybe her husband would be there. Maybe he would say sorry. But no, Temba had run away. After setting her on fire, he had left, vanished. No one knew where he went. Some people whispered he went to Kenya. Others said he hid in the village, but he was gone. Just like that. Her friends didn't come either. They stopped answering calls. Some blocked her number. Some said they were busy. Others said nothing at all. She lay in the hospital, day after day, waiting to hear footsteps, hoping for a familiar voice, but the door never opened for her. Even her in-laws acted like she no longer existed. No one from Temba's family came to see her, not even a phone call. They told people, "We don't know her." They told neighbors, "She brought this on herself." Zola heard the nurses whisper when they thought she was asleep. "Poor girl," one said. "Her own people abandoned her." Another said, "She won't survive. She's too far gone." Some even said she should be left to die. They thought she couldn't hear, but she did, every word, and those words stayed in her heart. She couldn't speak yet. The burns around her mouth were still healing, but in her mind, she screamed every day, screamed from pain, from fear, from loneliness. She wanted to ask, "Why me?" But no answer came. She was just 26. Each morning, nurses helped her sit up. It hurt. Her back was stiff. Her skin pulled tightly over healing wounds. She clenched her teeth, but she didn't cry. She had cried enough already. She stared at the white wall in front of her and blinked slowly. Hours passed like that, just sitting, breathing, existing. One day a doctor came in and stood at the end of her bed. He looked at her face, then at the chart. He sighed and said to a nurse, "It's a miracle she's still here." Zola heard that, And for a moment, something inside her sparked. A miracle. That word stayed with her. She began to notice small things. A bird landing on the windowsill, the sun shining on her blanket, the soft hands of one nurse who always smiled. These tiny things helped her hold on. But the pain didn't go away. Not just the pain in her body. The pain in her heart was worse. She had no mirror, but she could see the way people looked at her. Some stared. Some looked away. One nurse gasped once when changing her bandage. That hurt the most. Not the skin, not the burns, but the reaction, the rejection. She wanted to ask for a mirror. She wanted to see the damage, but she was afraid. Maybe it was better not to see. Her days were slow. The hospital was loud in the morning, quiet in the evening. Zola watched the ceiling, watched shadows move, watched people leave, but she stayed. Day after day, week after week, month after month. One night while she lay awake, a nurse came to check on her. She asked softly, "Do you want to call someone?" Zola shook her head. Who would she call? Another nurse, younger, brought her a radio. It played soft music. Zola listened, not to the words, but to the sound. It was the first comfort she had in weeks. The music helped her sleep, but the dreams were not kind. In her dreams, she was still burning, still screaming, still watching Temba's face as he struck the match. The pain woke her up often. She would sweat and cry silently, afraid to wake anyone. She was moved from the ICU to a quiet ward. It was called the burn unit. There were other patients there, but most were children. Some screamed in pain. Some cried for their mothers. Zola didn't cry. She just listened. The sound of suffering filled the air. One day a social worker visited. She asked questions. "Do you have anyone to support you?" Zola shook her head. "Do you want to talk to a counselor?" Zola didn't answer. What could she say? Her voice was weak, her heart weaker. After the worker left, Zola felt even more alone. Even professionals couldn't help. One morning, a nurse brought her a notebook and said, "Maybe you want to write or draw." Zola looked at her hands. Her right hand was still stiff, but her left hand could move a little. She took the pen slowly. Her fingers trembled, but she wrote her name, Zola. It was shaky, ugly, but it was there. She was still here. She started writing one word each day. Pain, alone, fire. Then one day, she wrote hope. She didn't know why, but the word came from somewhere deep inside. That night she remembered a song her mother used to sing, about flowers growing in ashes. She thought, maybe I'm a flower, a broken flower, but still trying. No one visited, not a single person, but Zola stopped waiting. She stopped hoping for calls, for apologies, for justice. She only hoped for strength. One more day, one more breath. The nurses started calling her strong. She doesn't complain. One said, she's silent but powerful, said another. Zola began sitting longer each day. She listened to the radio. She drew shapes in her notebook. She didn't draw faces yet. Only lines, circles, mountains, fire. She saw other burn victims come in. Some cried. Some were angry. Some refused to eat. Zola watched them. She understood their pain. She wanted to help, but she didn't know how. Still, she smiled at them. A small smile. A broken smile, but a real one. Some of them smiled back. One little girl with burns on her legs sat next to Zola one day. She had no one either. Zola held her hand gently with her left. The girl said, "Does it ever stop hurting?" Zola didn't lie. She nodded slowly. "A little," she whispered. That was the first time she spoke in weeks. From that day, the girl came every afternoon. She watched Zola draw in her notebook. They didn't speak much, but they sat together. Zola started drawing faces. At first they were faceless, just heads. Then slowly, eyes, lips, scars. She drew what she felt, what she saw. Each face looked like someone she remembered, someone she met, someone like her. People started to notice. Nurses looked at her notebook and gasped. "You drew this with your left hand?" Zola nodded. They praised her, not out of pity, but out of respect. One nurse asked if she could hang one on the wall. Zola said yes. Her art stayed on that wall for weeks. Then more people started asking her to draw them. Patients, even staff. Not perfect pictures, but real ones. Honest, raw, with scars and all. Zola didn't draw beauty. She drew truth, and truth had power. Still, her heart felt heavy. Temba was free. She was broken. No one talked about it anymore. They just moved on. But Zola couldn't. She wanted justice. But the system was slow, silent. So she chose something else. Healing. Not forgetting. Not forgiving. Just healing. She took her pain and made it into pictures. Each picture told a story. And Zola, once abandoned, became someone others looked to. She was still alone, but she was no longer invisible. Zola had survived the fire. She had survived the hospital. She had survived being abandoned, forgotten, and whispered about. Now, back in the small rental room in Mikocheni, Dar es Salaam, she lived quietly. Her face was no longer what it used to be. Her hands, once soft and graceful, were stiff with scars. Her body was tired, but her spirit had learned to breathe again. She stayed indoors most days, hiding from the stares that followed her in the street. Sometimes children pointed, sometimes people crossed to the other side. They didn't mean to be cruel, but their eyes carried judgment. It stung, even now, so she chose silence. She kept the curtains drawn and filled her days with sketching. Her art had become her voice. Every line she drew felt like a word she couldn't speak. Every portrait felt like a page from her soul. One evening, after finishing a portrait of a woman with a shaved head and one tear rolling down her cheek, Zola looked at the drawing and felt something powerful. The woman in the portrait was not broken. She was strong. Her eyes held pain, yes, but also a storm of survival. Zola stared at it for a long time, her left hand resting softly on the edge of the sketchbook. She wanted to share it, but not as Zola. Zola was the woman people pitied, whispered about, and judged. But the artist, she could be someone else, someone powerful, someone without scars. She opened a second-hand laptop that a nurse had gifted her during recovery. The screen flickered a bit, but it worked. She searched how to open an art page anonymously. She created an account and named it Uhai. In Swahili, it meant life. It was the only name that felt right. With trembling fingers, she uploaded her first drawing. She didn't write much, just a caption. She cried in silence but stood like a warrior. Then she closed the laptop and waited. The next day, she checked the page. 5 likes, 1 comment, then 10, then 20. The comment read, "I don't know who you are, but your art speaks to my pain." Zola's heart beat faster. She wasn't alone. Each week she shared a new drawing. Some portraits were of women she'd met in the hospital, some were imagined. Women with tired eyes, burned scars, missing limbs, or wrapped in cloth with children tied to their backs. All of them were warriors, and all of them were beautiful. She didn't post photos of herself. She never revealed her name or story. Her hands still shook, and her face, though healing, was still marked. But her drawings were smooth, bold, and full of truth. The page began to grow. Women from Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Ghana, even South Africa began sharing her work. One piece went viral, a drawing of a woman carrying a cracked mirror. In the reflection, her scars were gone, but her eyes were full of pain. The caption read, "Even if the world sees beauty, she carries the weight of what they cannot see." It was shared thousands of times. Bloggers wrote about it. Art lovers called her work raw and real. Survivors messaged the page, sharing their stories of domestic violence, war, trauma, and silence. Many wrote, "You put my pain on paper." Zola sat in her room, reading those messages with tears streaming down her cheeks. These women weren't just strangers, they were her sisters, her tribe. She had once felt so alone. But now, through art, she had created something connection. Soon, people began calling her the masked artist of Mikocheni. No one knew her face, no one knew her name, but everyone knew her heart. The media tried to find her. They sent emails to the page, begging for interviews. She always replied, "The art is what matters, not the artist." But even as her page grew, Zola stayed humble. She still drew from the floor of her small room. She used simple pencils, charcoal, and leftover paper. She still tied a scarf around her head and wore gloves when she had to step outside. She was not famous, she was not rich, but she was full of purpose. She began using the page to tell stories. Below each drawing, she wrote short captions, some fictional, some real, like the portrait of an old woman with empty eyes. Her husband hid her for 20 years. No one believed her. But now, the world will remember her face, or the drawing of a girl in a school uniform with scars down her neck. She survived a fire her brother set when she refused to drop out. She now wants to be a doctor. People cried reading these captions. They reposted. They messaged her with their own stories. One woman wrote, "I was going to give up tonight, but then I saw your art. Now I want to fight again." Zola didn't feel famous. She felt seen. And through her, other women were being seen too. She began printing some of the drawings and sending them to women's shelters. One shelter in Nairobi framed a portrait of a mother and child and placed it at the entrance. Another in Lusaka asked for permission to use her art in workshops. Zola agreed to everything. Her only request, never stop telling their stories. She created a series called Faces of Fire. It included 12 portraits, all of burned survivors. Some were smiling, some were not, but all were alive. She posted them one by one. On the last day, she wrote, "We are not our scars, we are our survival." That quote was printed on t-shirts, mugs, posters. But Zola didn't ask for money. She asked for change. One day, a famous Tanzanian singer shared her work. "Uhai is saving lives with pencils," the post read. After that, the followers doubled, then tripled. Zola's inbox flooded. Some people asked to buy the art, some wanted her to paint them, some offered money. Zola refused most offers. She wasn't ready, not yet, but something inside her was changing. For the first time, she was thinking of stepping out of the shadows. One evening, as she looked at all the messages, one voice returned to her mind. It was the voice of the young girl from the hospital, the one who had drawn her. She had said, "You helped me see that even after fire there is still beauty." That voice stayed with her. Maybe the world was ready to see her, or maybe she was ready to be seen. But before anything else, she picked up her pencil again. She started sketching a new face. This time, it was her own. Not the face from before, not the Zola with smooth skin and bright eyes, but the Zola of now, the woman with scars, soft eyes, a calm strength. It was time. She was Uhai. She was life, and her story was only beginning. The email came late at night. Zola was sitting on the floor, surrounded by her sketches. The room was dark except for the light coming from her old laptop. The email was short and formal, but it made her heart beat faster. A prestigious gallery in Nairobi had been following her online page, Uhai. They wanted her, not just her art, her. They wanted the artist to reveal her face, her name, and her story at a live art show. They offered to fly her out, pay for everything. They said, "Your work is changing lives. It's time people meet the soul behind it." Zola stared at the screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. A year ago, she couldn't even look at her own face in a mirror. Now the world wanted to look at her. She wasn't sure she was ready, but something in her chest whispered, "You are." She didn't tell many people, only one nurse who had helped her during rehab. The rest of the world still knew her as Uhai, the mysterious artist whose drawings of pain, survival, and womanhood had gone viral across Africa. No one had seen her. No one knew her scars, her voice, her past. This gallery event would change all that. The day came. She arrived in Nairobi in silence. The gallery had arranged a hotel and a stylist. They had even hired someone to help her with makeup, but Zola refused. She didn't want to cover her scars. She didn't come to hide. She came to show the truth. The gallery was packed. Influencers, celebrities, journalists, survivors, lovers of art. Everyone wanted to be there for the moment. Uhai removed the mask. Giant frames of her art hung on every wall. Each piece had a story printed beside it. Women crying, women standing, women surviving. A soft light filled the room. A slow melody played in the background. People whispered, took photos, stared at the drawings with wet eyes, but still no one knew who the artist was. There was one empty spotlight in the center of the room. A voice on the microphone said, "Tonight we meet the woman who taught us that scars can speak. Please welcome Uhai." The crowd turned. A door opened, and Zola stepped in. She was not wearing a mask. Her face was not hidden. She wore a simple black dress that showed her scarred arms. Her skin was marked, her fingers stiff, but she stood tall, with soft eyes and a steady breath. For a moment, the entire room went quiet. Not a single phone click, not a whisper, just silence. Then came a gasp. Then came clapping. Then came tears. People stood up from their seats. They clapped louder. Some covered their mouths. Some cried openly. She walked slowly, carefully, all the way to the center. A microphone waited for her. She looked around, took a deep breath, and spoke quietly. "I was supposed to die in fire, but I didn't. I lived, and with these hands, these burned, broken hands, I drew life again. My name is Zola, but you know me as Uhai. Thank you for seeing me." The applause was thunder now. Cameras flashed. A woman in the front row was sobbing into her scarf. Zola tried to smile, even though tears had filled her eyes. But then she saw him, in the back corner of the room, leaning against a wall, alone, looking smaller than ever. Temba, her husband, the man who poured oil on her, who lit the match, who ran away when her skin melted, the man who vanished when she needed him most. He stood there, not in fine clothes, not as the proud businessman he once was. He was thin, weak, wearing torn shoes and a wrinkled shirt. His eyes were full of disbelief. His lips trembled. He didn't expect this. He had thought she'd die. He had told her she'd never be loved again, that no one would look at her twice, that her life was over, and now he was watching her be celebrated, watched her shine under lights, watched people call her brave, powerful, inspiring, and he stood there with nothing, no money, no pride, no power. Zola saw him clearly. Their eyes met for a second. He opened his mouth maybe to say her name, maybe to beg, but Zola turned away. She had already drawn him once, in a sketch she never posted. In that drawing, she made him a shadow behind flames. She never told anyone it was him. But in her mind, it was the perfect place for him to live, in the background, silent, fading. The event went on. Zola walked through the gallery with quiet grace. People stopped her, hugged her, told her how much her drawings meant to them. One woman said, "Your art helped me leave a violent man." Another whispered, "My sister is alive because of your story." Zola listened. She held their hands. She looked them in the eyes. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Her scars spoke louder than any words. Later that night, as the gallery emptied, a journalist asked if she would ever draw herself again. Zola looked at her and replied, "I draw myself every time I draw a woman who survives." As she left the building, the cool Nairobi air touched her face. She didn't hide it. She walked proudly into the night, carrying a small bag of art supplies and a head full of stories. Behind her, the lights of the gallery stayed on. Her name, Uhai, now printed on banners, billboards, and people's hearts. And somewhere in the dark corner of that room, Temba stood alone, ignored by the crowd, finally feeling what it meant to be invisible. Zola didn't need revenge. She didn't need to scream or cry or explain. Her presence was enough. Her survival was louder than fire. Her voice was made of lines, of faces, of truth, and that night the whole world heard her. The gallery was still buzzing with whispers from the night before. People couldn't stop talking about the woman behind the name Uhai. But Zola had one more thing to do. She walked into the same gallery the next morning with a large covered frame in her hands. Everyone stood still as she placed it gently on an easel. Cameras flashed, people leaned in. With calm hands, Zola pulled off the cloth. The room gasped. It was a painting of herself, bold and powerful. She stood in the middle of tall, burning flames, but she wasn't crying. She wasn't falling. She stood tall, her face calm, her scars shining like gold. Behind her were shadows of other women, some rising, some still crawling, but all moving forward through the fire. Zola looked at the crowd and said softly, "This is my last piece. It's called I Lived." Then she made an announcement no one expected. She said, "I'm starting a fund for women who suffer in silence, for those hurt, abused, burned, and forgotten. They will have lawyers. They will have voices. They will not fight alone." People broke into applause. Journalists scrambled to capture her words. TV news picked it up in minutes. Social media exploded. Justice with Uhai started trending. Then something happened that made everyone pause. The court reopened Zola's case, something she never begged for, but something she had earned. Witnesses who once disappeared came forward. Nurses spoke up. Even neighbors who once stayed silent found their voices, and by sunset that very day, it happened. Temba, her abuser, the man who once called her worthless, was handcuffed at a dirty street corner. No guards, no warning, just quiet justice. A police van pulled up. He was taken away, just like that. Zola never looked back. Her art spoke, her silence roared, and finally justice listened.